I mentioned that call I took on Saturday. It's a wasted opportunity. It costs money to put me on your list. It costs money to get me on the phone. It costs time because I was being a pain in the ass. It took 20 minutes to get that woman to get off the phone with me. I took 20 minutes of presumably her 8-hour day, and I'm a non-seller. So if you look at soft costs, there's absolutely 100% a cost associated with not having the right leads or the right leads in front of you.
My boy Frankie started his business with 2 condos in Charlottesville and a lot of hustle. And today he owns over 300 doors and flips several hundred real estate properties a year. This is a fun episode. We kind of peel back the curtains a little bit on Frank's real estate empire. We talk about the staff that it takes to do that type of volume and how he manages it. So if you are someone who is interested in building a real estate career, there are a few people that are more interesting than Frank to learn from. Hope you enjoy this one. If you are new to our podcast, hit subscribe. And if you've been around for a long time and haven't given us a review, shame on you.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie.
Ian, you son of a bitch.
Frankie, we are in your wheelhouse today, brother. We've had a few people ask questions after the real estate bubble episode that we did about how we evaluate real estate, and really how we evaluate real estate is not as important. I think it's more important how you evaluate real estate, because I do it as an investment. You do it as your life. This is your core business. So this episode required zero prep from my boy Frankie today.
I opened 2 documents, Ian, and that was it. Not
that Frank ever does any goddamn prep for any of these episodes anyway. He's the diva of the show.
Clearly, the fun, 2 really cool things happened today. First of all, we had our first fan interlude. Someone came to the office because they're just huge fans of Let Me Speak to a Manager. And as soon as this is true, and then when they were here, like, I could just tell something was off in the office. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And they're like, we want to lodge a formal complaint. And it had enough to do with Ian, where I'm like, all right, come back here. Ian and I were already on. I'm like, do you know about this?
He immediately looks at me as if I'm one of his employees and I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble in some way. Why do I have an investor in my office complaining? Did you raise this money? Oh, it was great. That was great. It ended up being a prank from our boy Paxton, sending a couple of his peeps in from Indiana to jack Frank up. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, so we got that out of the way. Now it's seriousness. But one of the other things that happened that was interesting is Ian did admit that he likes doing this with me because of the way that I think about things. So don't let him fool you, loyal listener, that I bring no value. But what we're going to talk about today is real estate investing. And I think we did an episode not too long ago about, are we in a bubble? And people found it interesting because we have a unique look at this. So what nobody ever tells you when you're a kid is life is like always walking on a sheet of ice. You're never sure if your next step is going to plunge you through the ice. You just don't know. So you need to be as you know, you can get hit by a bus. Someone who's incredibly dear to me on Friday walked in and they got fired. Like, shit happens, and it happens all the time. So what you try and do is you try and mitigate downside. And that's the most important thing with any type of deal or investing, as far as I can see. So what we do, and I think it bears this out, is we go after attractive targets. So my entire business starts with finding people who are the right clients for us. Once we find the right clients for us, and I know that we can actually provide value and offer a service that they need, and we do this through postcards, phone calls, text messages, television ads. Like we have internet ads, YouTube ads. Like we have a robust lead gen strategy. But once you find someone who has a need that you can satisfy, and there's a house behind it that needs to be solved, or a problem that needs to be solved with a house, that's when we start what we do. And where it starts, Ian, is with our contract. How do we control the deal? What will we and will we not allow to get into a deal or a contract? And then the process can go from there. And ultimately what we do with something is we might assign it in a wholesale. We might
Let's start. Frankie, can I ask you real quick, just on the front end, just for some listeners that still don't 100% understand your business. So you have 40 employees?
50.
52. You have 50 employees. How many of them work on the
lead gen and sales side?
Acquisition side?
More than half.
More than half work on the acquisition side. So acquisition, you have a marketing arm, you have a sales arm that is bringing in the leads that come in and evaluating it and kind of funneling it out. So their job is to really understand what the company's focus is and funneling out, like, that's not a lead that we would take. That's not something Cava would do. So that's part of it. So fair to say, so we're a little toppy in the market. It's had a high run. Doesn't mean that we've hit the top. We've had a hard 3-year run here of pricing. But pretty fair to say that your business is set up where, with the number of employees you have to keep acquiring at some point. If you have a 50-person business, you have to acquire. So that means you have to be smarter. When everyone's piling into the market, it makes it harder on you, but you have to be smarter about how you acquire your leads. And you, as the owner, have to be very disciplined, because the bigger your team is, the more they're going to be screaming at you, we need to do this deal, because they want to make a commission.
So I think this is absolutely critical to dive into. So I'm going to explain what we do, and then I'm going to explain how I mitigate risk or how we do deals, like Ian just said. So the most important thing is I need to keep generating revenue. If I stop generating revenue, I can't pay overhead. I can't pay my staff. So we can't pay the bills. So we have to generate revenue. So what we use, a house, mostly it's houses. Sometimes it's land, sometimes it's commercial buildings, but for the vast majority, it's homes. What we do is, in and around Richmond, we're known kind of across the country as a real estate investor, a single family real estate investor. And what a single family real estate investor does is they generate leads around people who are motivated to sell a house. They're not going to call Century 21. They have some other need, want, and desire that a traditional real estate sale isn't going to accomplish. So that's when they call us. Now, that is a distinguisher first. Second, what do we do with them? We get it under contract and we can assign it. I'm going to come back to that. We get it under contract.
Real quick, so the thing you just said is important. Warren Buffett talks about moats, right? What is the moat around your business? What insulates you from a competitor jumping in and doing the same thing you're doing? So if I'm a little guy and I see Frank Cava and Cava Companies, and I say, man, look at that big office. Look at their signs are everywhere. That guy's big. I want to be like Frank Cava. I see him on TV. The reason I can't immediately compete with you is because I don't have a source of leads like you do. I would have to go in and buy retail. I'd have to go on the MLS and see something someone's already listed. And if it's on the MLS, there's a good chance it's probably not priced right if it's sitting there long enough for me to get it. So if I were to try to go compete with you, I would either have to go door to door, leaving pamphlets, or I would have to, the amount of money you spend to get people to respond back to you is incredible, versus a little guy who wants to start in this business. He has to go off of public information, and that means he's probably going to overpay for, and that's everything in your world is what you pay for it.
So Saturday night, we're doing this really cool thing on a building. Ian and I are in the building together. I haven't shown him yet what it is, but I'm excited to show him. I spent the whole day Saturday at one of my buildings, and I was there with the contractor doing the work, and he handed me a beer. So we took a bucket lift up. We watched the sun go down. There was people working on the building, had a beer. It was nice. I went home. I had a second beer. My wife and I split an IPA. So that's like drinking a beer and a half. So I've got, a little bit of a buzz. My wife's like, I think a bottle of wine sounds nice. I'm like, great. So I opened the bottle of wine. I've had 3 cocktails, which when you're in your 40s and you have kids, 3 cocktails is a lot of cocktails. It's not like I'm going out to happy hour. So I have a little bit of a buzz. I get a phone call from a phone number that I don't recognize, which means it's a spam call. It turns out it's a virtual assistant who works for a local home seller or home buyer like me, and they're calling me on my cell phone. So I shouldn't be on your list. So what I realized is this person's virtual assistant is actually pretty good. They asked me a lot of good questions. They didn't have the authority to ask me my price or make me an offer. They didn't have that authority, which was kind of stupid, I thought. But I was like, interesting, good call, good training. I knew exactly what was happening, and I like to feel that stuff out. But I mentioned drinking because I was probably a little bit more patient than I would have been, but this is critical. I shouldn't be on your list. I'm not a distressed seller. I'm not going to sell to another wholesaler. If you are calling me, you are wasting your marketing dollar. I should be crossed off the list. What I was talking to Ian about earlier today is who's on your list. The list provider that we work with is a company that's been valued at like a very significant number, like big into the multiple millions. And what they do is they sift through data and tell people like me, this is a target or this isn't. So where you start is huge. My big advantage.
Can a little guy afford the organization that you work with that provides those leads? It's kind of, it makes me think of Glen Gary, Glen Ross. These are the Glen Gary leads, and you can't have them. Everyone's screaming for them. Every salesperson in the world wants hot leads, but hot leads cost more than crappy leads, right? You are a crappy lead, right? Clearly for what that person's doing. So their lead provider is not as good as yours is.
Right.
But do you pay so much for those leads that a little guy couldn't do it?
So maybe, but I was here first. So I have the leads that this business is really good at providing because I've had longevity. I have a relationship. This business that does the lead providing came to our office with 3 of their staff people for 2 full days. And the reason they did that is they want to learn from us. We have an interactive relationship. They're getting better by understanding what we think is and isn't a deal. I spent an entire day in the car with them yesterday, driving around looking at this is a deal, this isn't, this is why, this is how I analyze this is how I think of it.
And have they gotten smarter over the years, Frank, of knowing what leads they've sent you and which ones have converted, which ones have turned into sales, what's turned into closings?
Yes.
So they know better, like zip codes and what variables
zip codes.
They're using.
We've talked about this here before. Zip codes, year built. There's areas in Richmond, like this is the segmented areas, like area 10, area 20, area 30. Like they know about those. They know who the demographic is of who the buyer and who the seller is. So all of these things.
So he's got an algorithm that's specific to Frank in Richmond, to Cava Companies.
He uses it with across the country to find sellers. And then he tightens it up market by market and MSA by MSA. And then the other thing is, Ian, that they have what's called an API, right? So there's the API it's a communication between our database and their database. So they can log directly, they don't have to log in, the API does the talking, but it talks back and forth. So we use Salesforce, and Salesforce tells them, this is an appointment, this is a deal, this is a closing, this is a revenue event. And then they take that and say, okay, we want more of these, less of these. So like we're super calibrated. So like what the question you ask is, can you afford it? Sure, you can afford it. Can you utilize it as well as I can? No. So I'm better than basically, and I know this, I'm better than almost everybody who is not like a regional. And what I mean by that is this, like I've got a couple of friends in Florida. They do like 1,500 deals a year. They're in 4 states. They're better than me. Their marketing is better. They're a little tighter. They got a bigger staff. There's multiple layers between them and the salespeople, where there's only 2 between me and the salespeople because of the fact that they've got bigger outfits. I've got a friend that does 15,000 deals a year. He's better. Now, fractionally so, but that's the difference between me and someone who's not as good as me. So those are some of the things you can look at. We can control the market because we have access to the data. We can move faster, and we know what to and not to do in our market.
I love that. So I'm still stuck on this. So your lead provider, how many leads a month are they providing to you, or is it just a database and you can't even get to it? Like you could hire all day.
Oh, no. We can see it and touch it and feel it and everything. So if you want the statistic, I can dig it up in a second, but there is the Richmond MSA is about, I'm doing this from memory. The Richmond MSA is like 1.2 million. There are like 400,000 rooftops in the Richmond MSA. Our data set is like 35,000, and it changes.
It changes because people's predicaments, they get behind on taxes. They were not a target a year ago. They are a target today. The ownership changed. Someone died in the family and they want to get rid of the house.
The greater economy can change. So like in 2010, 11, 12, we had 80,000 targets. So like literally 80 divided by 40 is, 20% of the targets that's a big number.
Unemployment was higher.
Right. Everything. And people,
a lot of people that were like, I shouldn't be owning a house right now. I need cash.
Yeah. So that's a big part of it. Right. So those are some of the things that you look at. And then the data provider does this too. I mentioned that call I took on Saturday. It's a wasted opportunity. It costs money to put me on your list. It costs money to get me on the phone. It costs time because I was being a pain in the ass. It took 20 minutes to get that woman to get off the phone with me. I took 20 minutes of presumably her 8-hour day, and I'm a non-seller. So if you look at soft costs, there's absolutely 100% a cost associated with not having the right leads or the right leads in front of you.
Love it. So you've got this database of 35,000 at any given time. You have 25 people on an acquisition team. They are divvied out in some way. You have incoming all the time. So your phone rings, someone's going to get on the phone with them in a couple of seconds. You've got, right, I imagine you've got these postcards. What about your TV late ads? What if someone gets that TV late ad and calls the 800 number at like 2 a.m. while they see Frank on TV?
We have someone live answering the phone 24/7.
So is this a VA in the Philippines somewhere who picks the phone up and takes the leads? So someone calls them in the morning when they're in office hours?
American based. We use an American based phone answer service. But most of the time it runs through the office. And this is fascinating, Ian. So you get 90.
You did play in the Philippines for a while.
Did
a little bit. You tried VAs. It didn't work for you. The language barrier, or what was it? Organization?
Combination of things. Maybe I'm a shitty manager for people who don't live here. I didn't get the area as much. I wasn't as patient with letting them learn it. Our sellers didn't connect with them. Maybe it's a bunch of excuses. I don't know. It didn't work for me. But what I realized is I like to have people answer the phone who understand us, our core values, and what we do.
So where are these folks? Are these folks near you? Are they in Richmond, or are they other places of the country?
So COVID changed the fact that I went away from all Richmond. I've got 2 lead gen people who are in California. I've got a lead gen woman who's down in Southwest Virginia. I've only met her once. I have one in South Carolina. I've got one in Florida. So we've got people all over.
California is fascinating because it's the opposite of the Philippines. It's like the most expensive real estate in the world versus you go Philippines because it's a little cheaper. That's kind of an interesting thing. You mentioned 2 Californias.
But they're young people. They used to live in Virginia Beach. They knew of us. They tried the wholesale in the state of Virginia. They struggled to do it. They may want to become wholesalers at some point in the future, but they want to learn from us. They're living with family and they're like, well, we want to understand Virginia, so we'll work with you.
Okay, so that person, a call comes in at 2 a.m. because you do have TV ads at 2 a.m, right? So they see it. You're on TV barking, call this 800 number, Cava Companies, we buy your house. They call. They get someone. You have it staffed all the time. That phone gets picked up. What is the person who's not one of your direct employees, who's just kind of handling the new calls? What are they skilled to do? Is that just, let me get your phone number and name and that's it? And boom, they send it to the lead gen department?
So I'm gonna do something that's kind of gonna blow your mind. People don't call off of TV at 2 in the morning. The only people who call at 2 in the morning are on the internet, and they'll fill out a web form, or they will call the 800 number because they're on the internet. Like, people don't call off TV at 2. I know this because I've been doing this for 12 and a half years. And I know that almost all of my calls, like 92%, are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday.
So are you staffed till 8 p.m.? Do
Yes.
you have people on shifts that will work till 8 p.m. in your office?
Yes. So we do that. So Ian, when you call someone and the business is closed, so you get frustrated. But when you call, like, in your experience, who's done it the best? Like, what did they make? Okay, the business is closed, but I feel good because I know my issue is going to be handled. Like, can you conjure a memory where that was handled well?
God, as you're saying it, I'm thinking of all the ones that frustrate me, like big hotel chains, airlines. When you want to call and do something, they say they only work from 8 to 5. That just frustrates the shit out of me. And they don't do a good job of saying, here's what we're going to do. It's kind of like call back during our hours.
There's two that come to mind for me. One's an attorney and one was a doctor. I called the doctor. It's 5:01. I don't call a doctor anymore. I have someone else who does it for me, but that's a different story. But back when I used to, and this is important, at 5:01, hello, you called so-and-so. This is their answering service. I know immediately that they're closed. I know I have an answering service. I'm like, oh, hi. They're like, what is your name? I'm like, I tell them. They're, okay, like, who are you calling for? And I was like, I'm calling for Dr. So-and-so. They're like, okay, they're closed. They'll open tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I've taken down your name. Is there a message? No, there's no message. Just have them call me back, please. Okay. And this is the phone number I have for you. Is that accurate? I said, yes, it is. Like, great. Again, this is the answering service. We'll make sure your call is returned promptly tomorrow morning. When I get that type of treatment, I feel good. So what we do on the phone is we say, we are not someone who can analyze your property. We're the answering service. We are currently closed because it's fucking 2 in the morning. So we'll have someone call you tomorrow and get back to you. And that's how we handle it. Now, if they've done absolutely nothing, we'll get, what's your address? What's the property you're thinking about selling? Is there anything? We'll ask a couple of those questions so we can get into our CRM. As long as we can get your name, your phone number, and the property address, like, we can follow up with you. So that's what we're trying to get. So those are the specific things that we're doing. And we have tons of people who answer the phone live. We have the service that answers, and then it goes from there. But I wanted to kind of lay that out for you. Is I want people to stop looking. Like, if you're drunk and you're hungry and you're looking for, you go to your phone and the first 2 places you try to order pizza from are closed, you're going to a third. That's who's calling you at 2 in the morning. So you need to understand, like, I need someone to tell them your pizza's on the way. And that's what we want to do.
I love that. Okay. So a lead comes in, let's say a lead comes in at 5 o'clock. You are staffed. The phone rings, someone calls, and most of these incoming are phone calls, or a lot of them online. They type their stuff in and you call them.
So we have outbound dial, outbound text, inbound dial. So they call us. So it's cheaper, Ian, to have someone on staff go through. So I know the list and I know my names. So I have American onshore people go through the list, make phone calls outbound, and ask you if you're interested in selling. So that's outbound dial. We've got a ton of outbound dial. It's less expensive than just blanketing out a bunch of postcards, and we'll go that way first. Text messages is kind of fraught with a lot of problems. So we no longer do it in-house. We've hired a consulting firm who does it for us. They take all the legal liability and we pay them a portion of the deal. So those are 2 outbounds. But if I can't find you through text or email, I've got television where you might call in, and then I mail to you. So in the old days, we used to mail to everybody. We used to send out like 60,000 postcards a month. Instead of doing that, we dial and send out, like, telephonically. And if we can't get you on the phone through text or dial, then we use a postcard.
Got it. Okay. So lots of different ways they can get to you.
Yep.
Person gets on the phone. What is
Yep.
your lead gen person trained to do? What information do they need to get before they will go to you? Because I'm sure you've trained them very well of that was a bad lead. Here's why it was a bad lead. Don't bring these to me anymore. And here's why.
Phone rings. Hello, how are you? Thanks for calling Cava Home Buyers. Who am I speaking with? This is Ian Mathews. Great, Ian. Thank you for calling. How can I help you? Start it like that. I've got a property to sell, something along those lines. Why'd you call? They want to get those things. So like what they want to do is they want to verify, number one, that they know who they're talking to. Like we got caller ID. We know who should be there. We want to verify that. Second, if you've dialed in, we want to verify your phone number. But that's thirdly important to what's the address of the property you're calling about. Like if you get those three things, a name, a phone number, and an address, and I would rank it as address first, phone second, name third. If you get those three things and the phone dies, we're good. We got you in our system, then we'll follow up with you.
Got it.
But then but if there is actually a conversation, thank you for calling. Why are you calling?
Now your marketing is very specific. Do you need to sell your house quickly? Do you need to sell it for cash? These are in your marketing. When you say good leads, some data points here. So recently changed hands. You're looking at specific zip codes. You're looking for someone who might be late on their tax bills. You have a lot of different reasons why someone might need to sell urgently.
So I'll say two things that you'll find interesting. First, we don't advertise that we pay cash, because most people who advertise they pay cash, the consumer thinks that that person's a scumbag on the other end and they're trying to get something over on them. So we don't use that. We use fast and hassle-free, or on your time frame and hassle-free instead of cash.
Cool.
One. Yeah. Two, the list is enormous. The items and the reasons and the motivations are very, very, very different. It could be everything that you mentioned. It could be way more niche than that. It could be, we know you've got huge medical bills. We know you're not paying your water bill, like all of those things. Like they're all of them.
You have that data, all of the public indicators that might mean someone financially should not own a house right now and would do better with the money than they would owning the house. You have the indicators that would tell you this person is a higher chance of being in our world of a good person that might be a motivated seller.
So this morning there was a prank played on me, and there were some people that came in to play the prank. And like, I didn't really want to go out there because I was afraid someone was going to scream and yell at me. That's usually what happens, right? So Carla was in the office with me, and she was like, it might be from so-and-so who lives in one of our rentals. He owes $4,000 on his water bill. It's a single family home. He's responsible for the water, not me. But what I can tell you is this: there's problems in that house. Now he's sending me threat letters and telling me I'm a scumbag and blah, blah, blah. I'm not. I'm doing all the right things. He's not paying his bills, and he's not paying his bills, and he's throwing Hail Marys, and he's trying to get me to write him a check so he can solve his problems. So that's as a renter, right? But I know this because I own the property, and they're telling me like, hey, there's going to be a lien put against this property because he hasn't paid his water bill. Like, okay, I get it. Like, I've dealt with this before, but I own the property. So ultimately I know about it. But let's say I don't own the property and there's a $4,000 water bill. It's really hard to live somewhere if you're not paying your freaking water bill. Like, why live in a house if you can't use the water? So that's an incredible thing to look at. Like, okay, someone is owner occupied of this address and they aren't paying their water bill. That's a target I want to talk to.
How quickly can your department, the
weekly,
person who's on the phone, how quickly can they get that? So I call in, I say, my name's Ian, here's my phone number, here's my address. As I'm talking to you, is your person on the phone with them able to pull up some of that data? Could I, as I'm talking to you, could I be like, oh shit, this guy's not paying his water bill? Could I find that out while I'm talking to you?
So yes and no. If you call me up and you don't tell me you don't have a water bill, I probably don't know it. But if you call me up and then I cross-reference you in my system and I realize, oh, this particular address is also on our water tax lien. Perfect. So do we say, hey, and I can see you're on this list.
Yeah,
you haven't paid your water bill. course
Obviously not. Obviously not.
But what we do is we teach them skillfully how to ask for questions and ask for motivators and what's at the core.
Yep.
So I will be honest with you, and I'll say this here, and I think you'll find this really interesting. Like when I got into this business, it's a lot less buttoned up or professional than where I worked before. At Ryan Homes, we would send out like a 7-color glossy mailer. It was beautiful. You know, it costs like $1.25 a piece to send this thing through the mail. It's incredible. I send out like a 33-cent mailer now. Like my friends are like, you went from over here, you're kind of predatory. And I took that to heart. And I was like, am I predatory? I asked myself all these questions. So what we teach our staff is this. If you're on our list or we're reaching out to you, there's a reason. We have an incredibly well cultivated list. But if you say you don't want us to work with you, don't call me, don't email me, don't do anything else, we'll take you off our list, no problem. You have to jump through any hoops, just say it, we'll take you off. But what I encourage everyone to do is find out what's the need. Why did you decide to call? What's the reason? What's the motivator? What is it? There's some reason. I get junk mail. I don't call on it. Why did you call? Why did you pick up the phone? Listen, Ian, let me tell you what makes us different than everybody else who might have sent you a postcard. And we get into it. And the thing that we want to get to immediately is you. What's the need? What do you have? What is it that we can do to help? How can Cava help? And we train everyone on that. And what you realize is most people are driving at the dollars and the value and the discount. And what we drive at is what is the emotional need that you have and how do we solve it? So I'm in the car, driving home a year ago with my wife and my mother-in-law's on the phone, and we're talking through the Bluetooth. And my wife's aunt, you know, has fallen into this, her health has gotten bad and her house has fallen into disrepair. And they were just seeking my advice. We're like in the car, let's just do the call. And what was interesting was this. Her mother told me the story, my mother-in-law, and I was like, okay, well, these are some of the things we could do. We could help her move. We could help her fix the house. We could help her find a place to live. We could find a moving company. We could do all of these things because that's what we do. We find someone who has a need and we help them solve the need. And in many instances, we pay for it. We'll advance the money. So what we want to get to more than did you not pay your water bill is what pain is being caused in your life that we can solve. And so you ask me what makes us different. I got better fucking data, but at the same time, I'm not desperate for a deal. And because I'm not desperate for a deal, I get to act with incredible conscience as a servant and someone who's not chasing you, but offering a service. And if my service isn't wanted, we will do it elsewhere. And that is what I think makes us incredibly different.
And the truth is, because you're able to act fast and provide that convenience, you're going to pay a price that is less than market, and you have to. It's kind of like, you know, some of these shows with the pawn shop shows where people come in and be like, I know this baseball card is worth $2,000, and you'll be like, great. So you want me to pay $2,000? Now I own it. How am I going to sell it if it's worth $2,000? Now I'm stuck with something I can't sell. And he's always great about that. Like, great, go sell it to someone for $2,000. You're in a pawn shop. My job is to sell what you are giving me at some margin that lets me keep the doors open. I can pay you $1,000 because I could probably charge $2,000, but you don't have the market I have of people that come through here. So it's worth something to me at $1,000. To you, if you can find someone for $2,000, great, but you're not a pawn shop. You don't have traffic. You need me to pay something, but my value is I own a store, I have employees, and I have a brand, and people come through and I know how to get rid of this. You know how to drive to a pawn shop.
Yep. And what's fascinating to me is you mentioned pawn shop is I thought of Trading Places. When Dan Aykroyd holds up the watch and he's like, this tells time in all these places. And he goes, in Philadelphia, it's worth $100. It was Bo Diddley that said that.
Yep. So your folks are trained to find out why they want to sell. Are they motivated?
Yep.
And then obviously to get an idea, their job before it ever gets to you this is what I think we could buy this house for. That's
Oh,
their
yeah.
job. That's their
So
job to
the-
get to that.
So the sales reps, what they do is they go through what we call champs qualifying. And what champs is what's the situation? Are you talking to a decision maker? Is there urgency? Like those are the qualifying steps. I'm not gonna get into it specifically, but that's close enough. But we go through that with everybody. Like, are you just some dipshit who's not on title? Like, I see your name is Ian Mathews, but this is owned by, Margaret Smith. What's your relationship to her? Well, she's my aunt. Well, are you on the title? Can you prove it? Because I'm not going on an appointment if you can't prove it. So those are little things that we'll do.
And are they able to quickly ascertain while they're on the phone what the market value is that Cava could put into it? Are they able to find,
Yes.
how do they know what offer to make?
So you don't make an offer like that. We could. We know approximately. We'll get at your value. We'll look at your square foot. We can look at a Zestimate. We got 100 different ways that we could do this. And we have different APIs that can tell us, like, we think this thing is worth this, or this is what our max offer is. But what we're looking for more than anything on that initial call is, are you a decision maker? Are you motivated? And if you got the right number, would you sell? And if the answer to those questions is yes, it's my lead gen person's job to set an appointment for my acquisition manager. So a good lead gen person is going to set 25 appointments in a month. A good acquisition manager is going to go on something in the neighborhood of about 12 appointments a week.
How many acquisition managers do you have?
I've got 5 in Richmond, 2 in Virginia Beach.
So these folks are a little more experienced than the lead gen folks, because they know how to value a property and they have a better idea of what you would have to put into it, what you could buy it at to make a margin you're looking to make.
Yep. And we also start people off answering the phones.
Yeah.
So you answer the phone, make calls, and you get your real estate license.
So you have a career path within the lead gen department.
Exactly.
Okay. So gets to the acquisition manager does their homework, looks at the house, sees that estimate, let's say a Cava estimate would be, we could probably sell this for 130 if we put 10,000 into it. Let's make an offer of 60.
So there's a bunch of ways to do this. I'm going to just jump in and tell you how we do it.
Yeah.
So we decided that this is house worth going on an appointment. Perfect. They set an appointment up for guy, Rob, right? Rob's our best. He's been here the longest. He's my longest standing employee. He knows what he's doing. So Rob says, okay, so-and-so sent me this appointment. I'm going to go into the MLS and I'm going to look at this. So the first thing is this, Ian. Everyone on my staff has access to the MLS. I'm a licensed realtor. Most people in this job are not realtors and they don't have MLS access. They're making decisions based upon non-MLS data. MLS data is the best. So we do it legally. I'm licensed. 5 or 6 people here are licensed. But if you're not licensed, you have to do it as one of my assistants, which is legal. You just have to disclose it and it costs me money. But I give you access to the best data. So Rob goes in, he looks at the house, 123 Main Street. Oh, I know this neighborhood. I bought a bunch of houses in here. It's X number of square feet. So what Rob does is he understands the property. And then what Rob will do is he finds what he calls the dog. The dog is the ugliest fucking house that's comparable to the one that he's going to look at. And in some instances, it's a perfect comp. In some instances, it's a real stretch. So he looks at it and he goes, okay, the max I'm going to pay for this is this. And I'm going to explain this, and it's going to take a second, but I'll get there. So he goes out on the appointment, he meets with them, and he tries to lock them up.
So he meets with everyone in person, or is it Zoom, or how does COVID change?
Almost everybody is in person. And
Okay.
we try and we can lock up over the phone. During COVID, we use Zoom. We did Zoom appointments. If they're willing to meet with us, people will wear masks or gloves or whatever, make people comfortable, but we like to meet them in person.
And they meet at the property?
If at all possible, we meet at the property.
So he can see it. He can see some things.
Because if you tell me you want 200,000 and I think it's worth 120 and it's got a huge freaking hole in the roof, well, I'm going to use that to my advantage. Like, I'd love to pay you 200. So Rob will do his research, understands his low end comp where he price anchors, and he works off of that. So all that to be said, but this is what's critical. I teach my staff what to pay, but everything is subjective, because that's kind of how the market works.
Yeah.
So Rob makes an offer, gets it under contract. I mentioned this to you earlier. The contract is actually the most important thing. The contract gives me an out intentionally. And I usually have a 30-day study and a 60-day close. So Rob doesn't have to call me from the property 6 times, say, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm thinking about. We teach him how to make good decisions. We teach him how to comp. And then we say, rely on the contract. Bring it back to the office. We'll study it. If you fucked up, we're going to tell you, hey, you overpaid. Call him back. Tell him we overpaid or we need to get out. Okay, boom. We've solved it. Now, Rob's really good. He doesn't overpay. But what he might do is he might lock it up and then we will take it to market. And if the market doesn't respond, then we need to go negotiate or get out of the contract. And those are the things that we do. So we're going to get to the point of risk mitigation and purchase in a second. But if we're going to buy a house and physically wholesale it, get it under contract and just charge a fee to somebody else, the contract helps us a ton, and our price anchoring with the low price. And then we kind of pitch the dream of, if you put X number of dollars into it, it could be worth this. And that's where we sell a ton of our stuff on the wholesale market.
Okay. So your contract, your acquisition manager, especially someone like Rob, he is, you've given him the ability that he can go out, Frank, and make an offer and even write a contract without you
Yes.
reviewing?
Yes.
Okay. So at what point would you even get involved in that deal?
Okay. So
are there any deals where you never even saw, like someone was like, yeah, we bought a house and we closed on it and we made $40,000. Pretty cool. And you were like, great job.
The word bought is where everything changes. So what we have is Rob understands it. I have a sales manager. I have a team. They analyze the deals. They figure out how much the house is worth on the back end if we're going to wholesale it. And what we do is we think, okay, if we buy this house, you're not making 100 grand, but I'm just gonna make the math easy, because like this market's way too competitive to make 100 grand on a $400,000 house. You're just not doing it. If someone tells you they're doing it, they're fucking lying. But the point, I'm going to make $100,000 on 123 Main Street. Fine. I will take $50,000, half of what I can make if I fixed and flipped it, if I took it to market and wholesaled it. Perfect. So Eddie and everybody on that side of the business knows that. And then what they do is they blast it out. And hey, we can make 100 if we bought it and took it down ourselves. We're going to make 65% or 70% and not touch it.
Assigning the contract to someone else.
Signing the contract and someone else does the work. And if that in fact happens, I never see it. So it never comes to me. It's gone through the system. Rob's done it. I hear about it. I can spot check, but I don't ever know about it because we've got a system that's incredibly well built based upon the metrics that we set in place. And I have managers who I trust. So I don't micromanage.
An assignment takes none of your cash.
Correct.
It puts none of the risk of title on you. You have no ownership.
Correct.
All you did was write a contract. Do you have to give any hand money on a contract?
We do. We have to give a deposit, but it's between
usually probably a really small. It's small enough where getting out of it is easy.
And I have a agreement set up with my title company where I just keep enough money there that I don't have to write them checks every time, and it just covers it. So my money's there ahead of the need. It gets assigned and reassigned and everything like that.
What percentage of the contracts that you write with customers ultimately get assigned, and which percent do you buy?
This changes drastically depending on the market. Today, 80% of our market, 85% of our stuff is assigned.
Wow, that's awesome. That's asset light to the core. That's the NVR in you right there. That's pretty cool because
you're damn right.
You're putting no risk out. You're just, well, the risk is you carry a lot of overhead to go find those deals to get the contract. So I don't have inventory. 50 employees is a lot of risk. That's a lot of risk.
I don't have inventory risk. And I think what we're driving at.
So in a downturn, none of that hurts you. You get out all those contracts. If the market overnight dropped 30%, all those contracts you have, you cut a check for a couple grand, earnest money deposit. I'm out. I'm out of the contract.
That's it.
Versus if you held all those houses, if you bought all of those, now you own all of those assets, and now the market dropped. Now you've just taken, multi-million-dollar write-off.
So this is where it gets serious. So clearly, if we're not making enough money, and I need to make enough money to cover my overhead with just my wholesale fees. So I look at my business and I say, I'm going to stay in business just with wholesale fees. So my overhead is a certain number. My wholesale fees need to be above that. Fix and flip is kind of gravy on top. And then anything else we make is, is furtherance of the gravy, but that's how I manage it. It's just a very quick and easy look. Here is where I said a second ago, get serious. If we're going to buy something, I have to approve it. It's my money. I signed the loan package. I am personally guaranteeing almost all of this shit. So I refuse to buy anything unless I looked at it. So sometimes I'm buying land, sometimes I'm buying houses. So there's an expiration date and people will know we need Frank's blessing on this before we're going to buy it. So a few days ago, like they brought me a lot. It was 25 grand. And I'm like, why didn't I know about this? They're like, well, it's a good deal. I'm like, all right. The next time you bring me a good fucking deal and I don't approve it, you're paying for it out of your paycheck. Got it. Like send the message. Like if I have to buy it, I want to look at it. The same reason why I have an incredible staff, but I look at all the selections on anything we're going to fix and sell on the market. I want to look at it. I want to feel it. I want to understand it because ultimately it comes to me. I missed the price and I got to drop it. So those are little things that we check, like the moat. I can get in trouble on a wholesale for sure, but it's hard. I've got a good contract. I've got parameters. We follow those. If we go to the next level where it's like a rental, we got parameters there. I could get hurt a lot less on a rental because of the purchase price and what I'm looking at. So I still approve it, but I don't have to necessarily look at the selections. I just need to say, yep, I'm good. They'll tell me like, hey,
what are you looking at on a rental? Are you looking at, is someone in there currently today? What the average lease might be? What are you looking at?
So my preference is to almost always buy a house vacant. But if there is a renter in there, when's the lease expire? But the most important thing to me, Ian, is how much do I have to pay for it? How much money goes into repairing it? And what will it rent for? Those are that's it. So like,
is there a ratio you're looking for? Are there rules of thumb that you use?
Oh, hell yeah. So
give me a typical rule of thumb on $100,000 house.
All right. So 100. So I'll set the goals. So a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house, normal, built 50 years, 75 years ago, built 1950. We have a ton of them. That's going to run for between $1,300 and $1,400 a month all day long. So what I want on that is I want to be at a debt service coverage ratio where after all my expenses, I can make at least $250 to $450 per month net per house. So it just becomes a formula. So nowadays, if it costs me 100, so I'm going to do it this way. I buy a house for 80. I put in 20. I take it down, I buy it, I put in my 20. I'm into the whole thing, including cost and carry, for 105. My goal is for that house to be worth at least 135,000. And this is why. If it's worth at least 135,000 at 75% loan to value, I can then get a permanent loan, get all of my money back, and I can cash flow to the numbers that I was just talking about. So if I was going to have a $105,000 note with today's interest rates, that's going to be principal, interest, taxes, insurance, plus all my overhead. That's going to be $700 a month on that house. And then that house is going to rent for $1,300. I'm making $600 a month and I have none of my own money invested. That's a smoke show. And that is replicatable and doable. And that's how I got the 300 houses is I picked the right ones that I can hold, renovate, and kind of get my money in and out and get repetition.
Aside from the numbers, just the accounting piece of it, because all of it's fascinating. The 300 that you've chosen, these are your chosen houses that you own and you rent out. Is there anything specific about the houses that you care about? Are there, obviously there's certain zip codes where you own a lot and you want to own more, you're gobbling up neighborhoods. But is there anything about the actual structure of the house that makes it more enticing for a long-term hold for you?
So we've talked on this podcast before about like, I don't buy things that are wood, that are over a certain age because they get termites. So what we look at more is neighborhood and who's your back end renter. We focus a lot on that. We're really, really good on the affordable side. Like we accept vouchers and that's what we're great at. So that's what we look at in a lot of instances. Now, if a house, so I talked to you about buying.
Why as a landlord would you care about accepting vouchers? Just explain that for people listening.
All right. So a lot of people don't want vouchers because you're working with Section 8 and the tenants can be incredibly rough on the house. For me, I know how to build the house so it has more longevity than the average person does. And I focus on that with my deliverable. In addition to that, what I like about it, and this was great during the pandemic, the government's paying the majority of the rent. If
almost
not
75%, right?
75 to 100%, depending on the person. Like some people, it might be 25%, but like in our portfolio, it's like close to 80% is paid directly by the government. So every month, 80% shows up in my bank account directly from Section 8.
So Frank and I owned 75 homes going into the pandemic, and it was fascinating to me, of which more than half of those folks in those houses lost their job during the pandemic or were furloughed or could not pay their rent. And so I thought immediately we're in a lot of trouble. And Frank said, well, don't assume that. Let's see what happens. But out of these 75, 80% of the houses that we had acquired were Section 8 housing, meaning we kept getting checks from the government on almost 100% of the rents, even while those people weren't working. So it was almost a perfect portfolio of rentals that we owned during the pandemic, in that we continued to collect because the government was backstopping. And then you started getting into the extra programs, the paycheck protection program, the housing protection programs. There are all these different programs that I think what we were getting, like 93% of our rents were coming in every month on 75 homes during April and May of the pandemic, literally the scariest 2 months of the pandemic. We just kept collecting rents.
So one of the things we want to talk about today is like building a moat, right? So I am not a Section 8 guy. I don't live in a Section 8 house. I never have. I tell the story not very often, but I do tell it. In the 70s, my dad collected unemployment for a very short period of time because the economy sucked and he was unemployed. And he was always thankful of that. My mom's a school teacher. We've talked about this, Ian and me. So she's influenced me. I think there's a need with affordability, but I'm also a for-profit business. And what I have learned is that I can provide things in this area because others aren't as good at it. The inventory that I find works well with it. And I'm secure because the federal government has a say in this, if I get paid or not. And I think the federal government's got a pretty good track record of paying their bills. So that is what I chose when I got into this line of work. I told you earlier, I don't really micromanage the under contract and assignment piece. I've got a contract that manages the hell out of it. I don't have to. When a house becomes a rental, I want to make sure the construction budget, you asked about the house itself, Ian, the construction budget justifies the overall budget. Yeah, I can buy a house for 10 grand. If it needs 90,000 worth of work, I don't care, as long as on the back end, it has a certain value. So all those things are right. Now, I'm not going to say, hey, this house has got a terrible roof or bad foundation. We'll buy it. We just won't fix it. I'm not going to do that. Like, I want to get the house to a certain standard so it's a good home that people are going to move into and stay. But those are the things you look at. But what I chose in 2009, I left NVR. They had $1 billion in cash in the bank at the time. I didn't. And I watched them shred their business apart because they basically did one thing. And they had to be super conservative. What I wanted to do was have kind of a leg stool program. I'll speculate on the flips. I'll take my assignment fees and collect as much of those as I can. And my guaranteed rents, I'm going to take that to the US government. I'm going to provide a program where there's real need. Most people don't want to participate. And that's what I kind of looked at my business. I have a coach and he called me weird. I'm like, I'm not weird. I'm just strategic in what I've picked. Where we will buy a house, I will mostly buy houses in the richest neighborhood in Richmond. And that's for flip because they're the biggest margins. It's close to the office. I know the product, I know the buyers. So these are things that I've gotten really, really focused on, where if I'm going to take a shot, I'm going to take a shot on an 850 house, because I can make 150 grand on an 850 house. And if I had to liquidate that thing at 699 and get all my money back out and not take a hit, that's a big discount. That's a 20% discount on a house like that. And I have a quick turn. So those are the things that I've kind of strategically wanted to set myself up for.
So how many deals do you have to review in a week on whether you're going to purchase?
Me personally, we'll buy like somewhere between, so slow months, we might buy 4, big months, we might buy 20. So, I mean, if I buy a whole package, I'm pretty involved in that. But like, I have it pulled up right here, right? Let me look at this right now for you. For the month of November, I'm going to wholesale 23. I'm purchasing 2. I'm selling 3. And I'm refinancing like 80. So I got 23 that I'm going to wholesale, 2 I'm purchasing. So that's it. So 2 out of 25, 4% are purchases.
How much does your decision to own as a rental or own as a flip or just a sign has to do with fluctuations of mortgage rates? Let's say if mortgage rates, inflation just keeps getting uglier and true mortgage rates go up 2%. Does that mean you're going to be buying and holding as rentals less because the economics don't work?
So, yeah. So I told you earlier today, I'm doing this 100 house project, right? Where I got 100 houses, I'm building them out of the ground. Everyone's like, why are you doing it now? It's a terrible time. Plywood has gone up. You can't get microwaves. I know. The reason I'm doing it now is because the cost of capital has gotten lower. I've got 30-year fixed money at 3 3/8 to 3.5% interest. Section 8 raised their rents by like $250 per house because of inflation. So now I'm saving $200 to $300 per month on interest, and I'm making $200 to $300 more over here. You can take that $400 or $500 and look at it and say, this just became cash flow positive where it wasn't before. Now it's go time. So if interest rates tick up, let's just say interest rates tick up to 6.
Right into that, if rents don't go any higher, which they probably won't in that case,
yep,
you've now got a worse spread. So you're not adding to that.
That's it. And if interest rates tick up to 6, I'm going to probably just have to take these things and sell them because I can't afford to refinance them anymore. And then I'll probably stop until the market allows me to. But that's why I have a huge construction department at the moment, and we are just flying. I'm trying to build 12 of these things a month because we have a finite window of time.
If someone is working a job right now, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Is now the time to quit your job and go all in on residential real estate, start a business like Frank? Probably not. It's a little late to be doing that. But if someone has a job or they have a different business and they've got some money, how would you recommend that they dip their toe in residential real estate?
So it depends on what you want. We wholesale 23 houses this month. Let me look at something real quick, Ian. Very, very quick overview. I see 3 names out of our 23 that are buying more than one. They're professional buyers. We've got a guy in our market, we probably sell 20 houses a year to. He has a staffing agency with, I don't know, hundreds of employees and staff people. What we do with him is we partner up. So he used to have a construction crew, and I convinced him, like, don't have your own construction crew, just have me do it. So I get the house. He calls and says he's interested. I know him by name. Someone says, hey, so-and-so's buying this. I'm like, all right, cool. See if he wants us to do the work. And then we do a profit share agreement. So that's a deal where he'll go out and put in 100 grand, 120 grand through hard money or whatever. And then he'll make 15 to 25 grand off of it. And he just keeps turning it. So this is a guy who makes a ton of money already, who will take some of his extra cash, and he just is smart. He vets the deals. He brings them to us. We do the work, and he makes more money on his money. So, we did a deal not too long ago where I got paid a $51,000 assignment fee. He made $18,000 and I made another $18,000 on the back end. And I was like, are you happy with that? He goes, yeah, I'm thrilled. I didn't touch it. I made 18 grand. Let's do it again. So that's a strategy. That same person owns roughly 50 to 75 single families. So now he's mostly flipping because he's having a hard time finding the discounts deep enough. And frankly, if there's a deep enough discount on a rental, I'll just keep it. So I don't bring it to market. But he's got those, and he called me up. He's like, hey, I'm thinking about selling 50 of these things. Would you help me? I said, sure, I'll do whatever you need. He goes, so I'll talk back. I go, okay, cool. So 2 weeks went by, 3 weeks went by. I called him up. I said, hey, you never called me back. He's like, yeah, the bank came back to me with like 3.325% interest, and I'm going to get 3 million out. I'm going to just keep these. Like, okay. So like once you own a bunch of properties, you get to have choices. So if you have a full-time job and you want to make a little bit of extra return, find someone like me and partner up. Like, or if you're listening to this and you want to buy stuff, we could do that together.
Without it even being, this isn't even an advertisement for Frank. The truth, I was just thinking the same myself. So I do have some residential exposure. Whenever I have residential exposure, it's through Frank. And the reason why, I got a lot of shit going on. I'm doing this. I've got a consulting business. I'm involved in a tech startup. I have commercial real estate, and I'm not an expert in resi. I don't have a construction team. I don't have a title team. I don't have the ability to vet deals. I don't have the time. I don't have access to Frank's leads. I don't have the ability to go fix it up. I don't have a property management team. So if I were to just go buy, let's just say, Frank, I went and bought like a $200,000 house somewhere, and it was renting, and I was like, cool, I got some money. I went and put 90% debt on it, and had a little bit of a spread. It'd be such a pain in my ass. I wouldn't know if I paid it right. If everything that went wrong and I took a phone call, I'd be pissed off that I bought that thing on my own. So I would rather, me personally, I would rather just work with a good operator like Frank. Yeah. Is it as profitable? No, it's not. It's not. Let's just say Frank and I split it half and half, whatever I go in with. Okay. Even then, it's still a good return for me. It's better than I could get in a bond or something different. I have exposure, but what I'm buying is I'm buying into Frank's expertise and his team strength, and that they know how to buy right. He usually doesn't buy poorly, and they're good at executing. So I don't want to go out and learn the hard way how to buy real estate at the top of the market. I want to go partner with someone who knows already what they're doing. That's why I invest through you. And Frank's not the only person out there that does this. If you know of someone who's involved in residential real estate that's really good and has a team, those are the questions I'd be asking. How do you acquire leads? What do you pay for those leads? What are their sources? How do you vet your deals? Tell me about your construction team. Who do you work with? Who's your property management arm? How do you do that? What expertise do you have? Those are the things that the reason I invest with you is I know all of those things are covered, and I'll never have to deal with it. I'll never have to deal with it.
If you're listening to this and you want to invest with somebody, here's the question you ask. Show me a list of your last 50 properties. I have it up. Okay, you want to do that right now? I can show you in seconds. If you're not a real operator, like you're going to hear someone fumble around, they're going to give you a bunch of bullshit. Like the only thing I might do is like hide the profit column, and I could send this to you in 2 minutes. So like, that's a great question to ask. And I think you need to know, like with any investment, what are you trying to do? My parents are 1031ing something right now. They want a coupon. My parents want a coupon. They want to know that every month, X number of dollars is going to show up in the bank. My dad will be 70 in a year and a half. He wants to know every month he shows up. He goes, Frank, man, what am I going to do with this? I'm like, Dad, buy it from me. I'll manage it for you. I'll make sure that money fucking gets there. If we run into problems, we'll fix that. So he clearly trusts me. It's my parents. And Ian and I have talked about this. His parents are in deals with us collectively, and Ian, like these are things you can do. And if you don't,
it's kind of the same with, it's a different asset class, Frank, but I have investors in all of my commercial properties that I'm in, and we've talked about this. It's kind of happened by accident. Just people kind of know that I'm already in the mix. So when people invest with me, they want a return, and they don't want to have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. They want to I send them a quarterly check, and they know that I deal with every call from the tenant. I have a legal department that vetted it, that underwrote the deal, that knows what they're talking about. I have a team that can go out and do work on the property if I need to. I have the financials, the taxes, all of that. All they got to do is send me a check. They've got an equity piece. Now, when I sell that property down the road, they'll get a chunk of it based on our agreement, and they get a percentage of the rent, and I keep a percentage of the rent as a fee. And they're okay with making less because they know that to make it all, they have to do all the shit I did, which is cold calling banks, finding deals, underwriting it, spending a bunch of money to acquire the deal. And then they got to deal with actually being the landlord and taking the phone calls from the tenant during COVID when they're all asking for a cut off at the top. They don't want to deal with that. So they're okay with, hey, I'll make 75% of what I could make doing all the stuff you did. I'll let you have the other 25 because you're doing that. But they're happy. The investors I have are happy with that return and the upside that real estate brings in commercial.
That's it. And even in the down market, if you do this right, you can still make money. So like we were talking yesterday, Ian and I were just kind of joking how the rich keep getting richer. Like we're trying to join. I mean, we're not going to be bashful. We're trying to join that crowd. Like, and my friend who now is, I'll call a friend that we do a bunch of deals with a year. He owns a staffing business. He has access to money. So by simply looking at an email and then telling us, hey, I might be interested in this one, he's making like an extra 300 or 400 grand a year. Like 300 or 400 grand a year is a ton of money. Like that's put you in the very, very, like the top, I would think 5% of salaries in the US, like very, very, very high. And he's just doing that as a side hustle because he's got access to money and he knows I could make more if I do this myself, to Ian's point, but I'm going to do just fine, keeping my eye on the ball over here and letting a pro do it over here.
And what is your time worth? You know, like to go, if you love real estate and you want to go start, great, like do it. But if you want exposure to real estate, it's a lot of time to do it yourself. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot on your shoulders. So, you know, is it worth it to make a little less and let someone else handle that stress and pressure that has a better organization? To me, the answer is yes, but I thought it would be interesting. And I learned a lot, even just listening today, how you look at it, how it even gets to the place where you say yes, no. And, you know, the fact is we're frothy in the market and you are still finding great deals all over the place, but you have a built-in advantage in that you have a very solid and trained team,
all that stuff. So I'll kind of close it out with this, Ian. So I let the contract control the front end. I still control the back end if we're going to own something. The hard part about being an active investor in what you think is an otherwise frothy market is allowing your biases to tell you that something is not a deal. So like a good example of this is there's a property on Bainbridge, doesn't matter, it's a street. I bought something there for like 17 grand. It was a fallen down piece of crap. I resold it for like 120 years later. I did nothing to it. I just sold what I had bought. And now things around the corner are going for like 500 grand. The funny thing is at 500 grand with the right setup, it's still papers. So even though it was 17,000 right around the corner 5-6 years ago, it's still a good deal. So it's like, okay, if I could go back to 2009 and buy Apple, could I, should I, would I? I have a copy of the flux capacitor on my desk. I don't have one except in a frame. So what I have to look at now is it a good investment now? Because I can't go backwards. Okay. Amazon, what Ian talked about, is still a good investment. Apple seems to be still a good investment. This particular house, although more expensive, is a good investment because it's in the right part of town. I know I can do these things with it. I know interest rates are really low. And because I have all these things going for me, it's a go.
Love it. Love it. Appreciate the insight into your empire, the empire of Cava Companies, Cava Worldwide, Cava Global.
Just Richmond, baby. Just Richmond.
Great episode, dude.
Thanks, Ian. Always a pleasure.
See you, Frankie.